Today I'm talking about default mood. So it's kind of like at house church, we've been going through some foundational, it's called Living Wisdom. It's kind of like a course that talks about a mental and emotional health, but through the lens of the Bible. And so this is one of the foundational topics and as a part of that. So yeah, to begin with, I'd just like to share a story that happened recently. A few months ago, Jerry's my husband, we met up with my parents at a cafe. And I love my parents and I know that they love me. But prior to this particular catch up, I started feeling more and more anxious. And when I got there, the anxiety increased and it stayed there the whole time that we were at the cafe. And when I got home, I was exhausted and drained. The funny thing was, nothing out of the ordinary happened. The food was great. The conversation was fine. By all accounts, it should have been a really nice time to, kind of catch up with family. But it wasn't. So why wasn't it? Well, it came down to my default mood. All of our perceptions towards life are rooted in our mood. It affects how we see life. It affects how we respond to situations, the opportunities that come our way, and the choices that we make. So a default mood is something that you rehearse and rehearse until it becomes automatic for your brain. It's like a habit that becomes so natural that you don't even think about having that mood. It's just suddenly you're already there. And your brain just is constantly reaching for it, even if that mood is actually no longer appropriate for the situation. In a sense, your default mood is like your brain's screensaver. Now, last week, Helen spoke about unbearable feelings, another topic in the foundational Living Wisdom series. And what they mean, what unbearable feelings are like the feelings you would do anything to avoid. That's why they're called unbearable. Negative default moods, you can have positive ones too, but negative default moods are not as unbearable as to be you totally want to avoid them, but they're still considered really highly unpleasant. And finding your default mood can be really difficult because it's so automatic. It's actually quite easy to just accept it as part of your personality, but the truth is people aren't just grumpy or just anxious. And we'll take a look at ways to figure out what your default mood might be a bit later. But first, how do you form a default mood? Well, it's something that gets set up in your childhood. Something happens to shape your attitude. If we go back to the example about me in the cafe with my parents, I think growing up, because of how my parents dealt with conflict, my younger sister and I, in particular, believed that we were responsible for managing our parents' emotions. And that's a lie that's had far-reaching consequences. For me, that turned into being on the lookout for any circumstances that might make my parents upset. So what actually happened that day at the cafe is that my default mood of impending disaster started to kick in, right? I tried to see if there was anything that could go wrong. This is subconsciously. I wasn't consciously thinking about this. So subconsciously, I was looking at what could go wrong so that I could be prepared for it. And then the more that nothing went wrong, the more anxious I felt because surely something bad was going to happen and I was missing it, right? I was on high alert the whole time, but the truth is that I didn't need to be. As a child, your circumstances, so what happened with me, that sets up your attitude. But then when you become a teenager and you've got this attitude, then that starts to determine your circumstances. And if you don't check it, if you're not self-aware, then you'll go through life with this attitude and you'll specifically seek out circumstances that reinforces that attitude. As a child, because I learnt to be on the lookout for potential things going wrong, because otherwise, my parents would be upset and it was my responsibility to make sure that they weren't. Then as a teenager, I continued this pattern until now as an adult, if I'm not aware, I just slipped into that default mood of impending disaster when I was with my parents. And sometimes I slip into it even if I'm not with my parents. So what is it that makes your default mood strong? Well, at the core of any negative default mood is a misbelief, or in other words, is a lie. So everything that we've learned at House Church so far, Helen spoke about unbearable feelings and Jerry spoke about family mottos the week before that. And next week, I think Stan is talking about wilds and fusions. So at the core of all of them is some sort of lie that we've believed. But what gives fuel to that lie and fans the flames for that lie is something called emotion-directed reasoning. And that is a belief that your feelings would never lie to you. So my belief that I'm responsible for managing the emotions of others resulted in my default mood of impending disaster and heightened anxiety. And because I was feeling anxious, I started looking for a cause. Because I was like, I'm feeling anxious, right? My feelings wouldn't lie to me. So if I'm feeling anxious, there must be a reason why I'm feeling anxious. So then I'm starting to look, okay, why might I be feeling anxious? And then that's where I become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because the more I'm feeling anxious, the more I'm afraid something's go wrong. And then because I'm so on like tense and high alert, it's most likely something will go wrong. and yeah, that's how you become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I didn't stop to question my feelings. But can you see, if I had stopped and just asked myself if my anxiety was accurately portraying reality, that I could have stopped my spiral. I didn't, so I got more and more anxious to the point where I couldn't enjoy myself at all. I gave short answers, and I just wanted to leave the whole time. Not good, Not fun. So this is a result of allowing your negative default mood and emotion-directed reasoning to control your mind. So just like all the other ones, family mottos, unbearable feelings, we need to question our default mood. The thing is, like, we can't trust an automatic attitude. Just because you feel it doesn't make it true, even if you've felt it every day of your life. So I'm currently part-time studying at AUT. I'm doing a graduate certificate for addictions. And just this week, we talked about something interesting. I know we have some health professionals in here, so you guys might know it. The human autonomic nervous system. Yeah. So it's ANS for short, right? So this system automatically regulates your essential body functions. So that the things that you don't consciously think about, right? So like your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, and like your digestion. Now there's a theory called the post-vagal theory, and it suggests that we actually have three main states of the system. The first state is when we feel safe and connected. So people describe when they're in this state as feeling calm, they're joyful, they're energized, curious, and connected to others. They are able to learn and connect the best when they're in this state. And like in your body as well, when you're in this state, it's actually associated with better digestion, a better immune response, and circulation. The second state is when you are in a fight or flight mode. So you perceive a threat, whether that's real or imagined, and your body starts to release stress hormones like adrenaline or cortisol. And that's actually to help your body prepare to like counter that threat. In this state, your heart rate and breathing increases to deliver more oxygen to your muscles, and you might have slower digestion to conserve your energy for your immediate needs if you need to fight or run away. And then the third state is when we freeze. So this state is also triggered by a perceived threat, but instead of getting ready to run or fight, your body shuts down. And yeah, in this state, the body functions slow down significantly, including all those things, heart rate, breathing, and digestion. So why am I bringing this up? Well, imagine if your default mood causes your nervous system to be in a fight or flight mode. That's what happened to me with my anxiety, right? And my default mood of impending disaster. I believed there was a threat, and my body automatically went into that second state. Now imagine if I never stopped to examine my default mood and I went around about life just constantly reaching for it. Our bodies are not meant to always be in that second state. The persistent stress hormones that are released, they can damage blood vessels and arteries, increase blood pressure, and raise risk of heart attacks or strokes. I mentioned that the body releases cortisol in that second state, and that's to give your body more energy. It increases the blood sugar levels. But if you keep releasing cortisol because you're in that kind of state, that can increase your appetite, and so you want to eat more to obtain extra energy. And as a result, that can also build up fat tissue and weight gain. What happens if your default mood causes your nervous system to shut down? Well, people in that third state often experience things like emotional numbness, which means you're detached from your emotions completely to protect yourself. Dissociation, which is when you perceive life outside of your body. It's like it's something happening to someone else. You can experience fatigue, physical immobilization, so difficulty moving, difficulty thinking clearly or focusing, and also a desire to isolate yourself from everyone else. So is that how you want to live your life? Because let me tell you, this is not what God wants for you. Tell him. The truth is, when it comes to our negative default moods, it has the power to control our outlook on life, keep our minds imprisoned, and even slowly destroy our body's physically. But the good news is that you can reset your default mood that is dominating your life. The first step is to figure out what your default mood is. And that can be a lot harder than it sounds. When I first learned about living wisdom and like the foundational concepts that we're going through, my default mood was actually the hardest one for me to recognize. And I think personally that comes down to the fact that because our default mood is something that we feel a lot more than things like your unbearable feelings, because it's so automatic, it's like a lot harder to separate because your default mood has become so embedded into your life. It's like the norm for you, even if it's not good for you. So some common examples of negative default moods include feeling overwhelmed, missing out again, impending disaster, which is the one that I struggle with, powerlessness, feeling left out or shut out, or rejected or unwanted. We generally have one main default mood, but we can also sink into different default moods in different situations. For example, like me with my parents. And I do have some questions that you can think about and discuss in your groups afterwards to figure out what your default mood might be. So one of them is, imagine you're home by yourself. There's nothing pressing that you need to do. You've got nothing planned. What are you thinking? What are you saying to yourself? What are you feeling? And then just start to observe how you feel in neutral situations that are not necessarily positive or negative. So that could be, how are you feeling when you're washing the dishes? Or what about when you're taking a shower or cooking dinner? And then see if there are any patterns. So once you've figured out what your default mood is, then it's important to find out why you have it. Like I said earlier in the talk, our default moods are formed during our childhood experiences. And so, the next step is to recognize the historical trauma that set you up to conclude the wrong thing and then reframe it. So again, with my example, it actually took me a while to figure out why I was feeling so bad. And when I got home from the cafe that day, I literally came back home and sat on the couch and cried. But then, once I had calmed down a bit more, I started working through my emotions. So then first question I asked myself was, what am I feeling? Exhausted. Okay, why? Well, because I've been on edge looking for something that is going to go wrong this whole time. Okay, but why? Well, because I started feeling anxious before I even got to the cafe. And why? Because I was going to meet my parents. Okay, so then why does meeting my parents makes me feel anxious and like I have to be on the lookout for something to go wrong? And that's when I got to the bottom of the lie that I believed that is at the core of that default mood. Because growing up, I had subconsciously concluded that I was responsible for managing their emotions. And that is exhausting. So once you've located what set you up for your default mood, comes a step of actually changing it and reframing it. So again, like family mottos and unbearable feelings, we need to replace the wrong conclusions that we've made, the lies that we've believed, with the truth. It's almost like telling your brain, hey, there's new truth now that you can use to reinterpret your life and circumstances. And this process is connected to the trace, face, and replace talk that Stan gave. So make sure you go back and listen to that one too if you're unsure about the process. So for me, in my example, I definitely needed to do some grieving and then apply the truth to my experience. And so what that looked like was writing down exactly how I felt when my parents argued and what the result of that was. And then I reframed it. So it looked something like, it wasn't my fault when my parents had fights and got angry. That is the result of their inability to control their emotions. I'm not responsible for making them happy. I was just a child, and that is a burden that not even an adult can bear. It grieved God when I took on this burden, and throughout my life, He has been gently telling me that it's okay to put that burden down. And this feeling that I believed as a child is not to be believed now. So in that example, you can see it's important to use the truth that is specific to your circumstance. General truth coaches and what truth coaches are just they're statements that almost like tell your brain the truth. For example, this feeling I believed as a child is not to be believed now. So general ones can help, but they're not as effective as ones that directly target the lie behind your default mood. And so that has to be like something that you do in your reframing process and work out yourself. But once I did go through that process, I really did find freedom. And, Jerry can attest to this. Now I'm able to hang out with my parents without the default mood of impending disaster, which isn't to say that it doesn't still pop up now and again, but because I have my truth coaches and I know why I go to that mood, I can gently and calmly soothe myself when it does pop up. The thing is, changing your default mood is a battle because you are essentially declaring war on what you once believed to be normal. So it's almost like declaring war on yourself, your own brain. And you'll probably experience a brief period of feeling intense disorientation. Because even though you have now the truth, your brain will want to go back to your negative default mood out of habit. And so in those cases, it's really important that you have your truth coaches to ground you and bring you back to reality. But I've also found when I ask myself questions, it also helps. So questions like, am I judging the future using the past? Is this feeling delusional or based in reality? Can I trust this feeling? Is this feeling helping me or harming me? And I want to make it clear that this is not about invalidating your feelings or telling yourself that you shouldn't feel like this. It's about acknowledging that you are feeling negative, but then questioning whether that is based in reality or not. So we'll break out into groups soon, but before we do, I'll just leave you with this. David Riddell, who is the man behind Living Wisdom, he says that prison isn't four walls, it's a mindset. A person can be locked up but be at perfect peace with themselves and their mind. But how many of us are physically walking around free but imprisoned by lies in our default mood? Cool. So if you guys have any questions, otherwise we can break up. Hi, Raj.
What did we purpose? Did you defining your own politics?
I'd say I am generally pretty happy. I'm a pretty happy person. I wake up and I'm like, I wonder what today is going to happen today, kind of thing. So I guess a positive default mood is just optimistic, probably.
Is it also grounded in history, like your life history?
I guess so, yeah, because our negative default moods are set up through our historical trauma. So yeah, the other way should also be similar. Yeah. Hi.
I don't know if I missed it, but when you start getting anxious when you're about to go see your parents, what's the truth coach you tell yourself?
Oh, so because I worked through it, I don't actually get anxious seeing my parents anymore. But if I were to get anxious, I would just tell myself those truth coaches, I'm not responsible for managing their emotions. They can feel however they want. That's their responsibility. Does that answer your question? Cool.
Also, you could add something optimistic as well. Yeah. Okay, this is not going to be like how it was before. It'll be positive. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Yeah.
This conversation. It's going to be good. So you can just, speak life and positivity as well.
Yeah.
I did have one more question. You know how the sense of impending disaster was connected to parents fighting with each other, right?
Yep.
So now you're married and far from living with your parents. Have you noticed yourself kind of like, let's say, transposing it to other situations?
Yeah, I have. It has happened before. Actually, the one that comes to mind was before me and Jerry got married, and we were in Taiwan, and we were like at a cinema, and Jerry had to go to the bathroom, and for some reason it like, kind of kicked in. And back then I hadn't learnt anything about this kind of stuff, so me and Jerry were really confused as to why I was feeling really anxious. Even ages after, we had seen the movie and like gone to get a drink or something, and I was still feeling anxious. Something bad was going to happen. So yeah, it has, but I would say that it hasn't happened for quite a while now. That specific default mood. Yeah.
It was helpful that in that case, even though you didn't know how to truth coach yourself out of it, you told me that you're feeling anxious.
Yeah.
That was really helpful. Because they were literally guessing as to why she's suddenly pissed off. It wasn't like we weren't fighting against each other.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, she's anxious, we don't know why, but she is. We can get out of here, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was helpful.